I mean, you're just constantly counting lemons, right? Like you're like, okay, like this is less than ideal here, but we have all of these other ducks in a row. And so it's just trying to really nip those lemons in the butt.
Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of The Wild Dispatch. I'm Robin and I'm back with more skills and stories from the wild. Whether it's the first or the 32nd episode you're listening to, welcome. Thanks for joining us today. If you'd like to stay up to date with all the weekly adventures and interviews, like and subscribe and follow and all that positive stuff. Also, if you happen to know anyone who has a pocket full of wild stories, then definitely reach out to me on Instagram, or you can send me an email with a suggestion. My email is thewilddispatch@gmail.com. Okay, so last episode we were in the balmy mountains of South Africa. It was especially balmy at that time of year as well. It was a little while ago. But we are now traveling all the way across the world and, well, through seasons, I guess, to Ontario. Oh, I'm going to murder the pronunciation of this. Ontario in Canada. Oh, dear. I'm excited to say that I'm lucky enough in this episode to speak with Kielyn Marrone, who is co-owner of the cold weather expedition guiding company named Lure of the North, which is a great name, by the way. Her name might also be familiar. She was on the hit TV show from History Channel called Alone. It was season 7. She lasted a whopping 80 days in the Arctic with nothing but, I don't remember the exact list of everything that people take with them, but usually it's like a knife, a pocket knife, or a multi-tool like a Leatherman style Leatherman. Well, that's the branding going deep in my brain there. A bow and arrow, and that's like a primitive bow and arrow. I think that you're allowed like 9 or 10 arrows. You get a tarp, you obviously some warm clothing, a sleeping bag, that kind of jazz. But it's very basic stuff. While Kai and I talk a bunch about all kinds of stuff in Alone, actually a lot of the things which for me are a little bit more surprising or the less talked about things, the realities of Alone, both during and after the experience. We also chat a lot about things like mental toughness and all of the ingredients actually that went into making Kai who she is today. I want to give a big thank you again to Kielyn. I had a fantastic time talking with her. We had such a amazing chat about so many different things. A lot of great rabbit holes. So thank you for that. But also I'm realizing rather than talking about how good the podcast is, maybe we should just shut up and get on with it so that you can hear it for yourself. Here's Kai.
Welcome to the Wild Dispatch.
Welcome, Kielyn.
Thank you.
Thank you for jumping on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
No, I'm super excited. We've done a couple of back and forth attempts at trying to connect on this chat. It's a product of, I guess, being in very different places and the seasons being so dominant, I think, on your life at that end. It seems like you've been doing a bunch of cool stuff.
Yeah.
I'm looking at your Instagram. Regularly, things pop up, and first of all, the photos are amazing. I think you're responsible for that. Is that right?
Thank you. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, such amazing pictures, and just like such striking adventures. And I think most recently, I don't know if I was seeing this quite right, but was I seeing like a setup with like canoes rigged to kind of like outriggers and sled, like almost like a part sled, part canoe setup? What was going on with that?
Yeah, that was us adapting to the what Mother Nature was giving us for the winter. We run a snowshoeing company. So we rely on there being ice and snow and we plan our schedule a year in advance, and it is normal or seasonal for winter to run, well into April for us, and that was not the case this winter. So we had a 2 week snowshoe trip planned. It was sold out. We had, 10 people ready to go for a snowshoe trip, which was designed to be like a deep winter journey across the hinterland. And, we're watching this winter and it's just going up and down with the weather, and the ice conditions were not very good. Um, and rather than just canning the expedition altogether and just being like, well, force of nature, we had no
Yeah.
choice, we had to
Sorry, guys.
cancel it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were like, well, like we gotta figure something out. So we gave them a couple different options. We said we can chase winter and travel way up north and find good ice and snow, or we can deal with what we've got in our local area. And we've always wanted to try. It's called canoe sledding. Um, and it's been yeah, it's been written about, in the old timey, books and travelers, when you couldn't just afford to wait the season out, where
Yes.
you had to do that little bit of transitional travel. So yeah, we pulled out all our old books and um, looked up sort of their design, and then just jumped on it. And we're like, okay, like we proposed this canoe sledding trip. We're going to travel on the same type of waterway. So like doing basically a canoe trip, but when there's ice, we'll be up on the ice and we'll put the canoes on top of these runnered sleds, drag them across the ice until we find an open lead. Then we'll take the sleds off, put them on top, and then run as fast as we can onto the broken ice, and then jump in the canoes and then paddle for a little bit and then launch the canoes back up onto the ice and use these specialized tools called pickaroons. And they're just like basically ice picks where you reach forward and then pull. You
Ah.
dig like the pick into the ice and then sort of like hip thrust your way forward. And then until you get onto, kind of testing the ice with one foot in the canoe, and you sort of like scootering the canoe until you feel like the ice is solid enough, and then you put the skis back on the canoe, and then away you go until you find more open water. And oh, it was such a cool way to just embrace sort of what nature gave us. And we've always wanted to try it.
Yeah.
We live off grid and remotely, and so we've been doing this for years just on our own, where like we have to go to town, but our creek opens up before the lake breaks up. So we'll paddle the canoe and then to do the exact same thing, but only just the two of us, and
Yes.
never like on a journey. It was always like, okay, like it's a short distance, I mean, it's still 6 kilometers, but this
Yeah.
trip we went 130 kilometers, um,
Wow.
over 2 weeks. So it was like, proper journey. And yeah, it was, we lost some folks along the way, like not along the way, but
Wait,
yeah.
you mean that they left the let's just clarify that one.
Yeah, no. So the snowshoe trip was supposed to be 12 of us total.
Okay.
And some people were like, this idea of the canoe sledding is not for me, I'm out. So we ended up having a group of 6 of us, for the canoe sledding. So we lost a few, and they're gonna hopefully join us next winter for a proper snowshoe trip. But we liked it so much that we're gonna offer it again in next spring.
Great.
Yeah, it was a really fun way to travel, like, and it felt so safe. Like you might think like, oh, like that sounds really dangerous because you're going, you're breaking through weak ice and you're paddling in frozen, like freezing cold water. But because it was a commercially guided trip, we were like, okay, we're going to do this right. And
Yeah.
we all wore dry suits and
Ah, okay.
PFTs. So even if we went in, we stayed totally dry, and we had the PFTs on. So it felt like we were, you know, you know, indestructible. Like it just felt really safe. There's
Yeah.
no moving water. It's just like plunk, and then you've got a canoe right next to you and three other canoes and, five other people to help you. So we had some fun with it. And yeah, it was really hard to capture photos and video though, because
Yes.
you're worried about your phone falling in the water or
Oh
like
man.
dropping it in the water. So I didn't get as many like photos and videos as I had wanted to, but I'll have to figure something out for next year because it was pretty cool.
Yeah, that's like a whole, I guess, I mean, it sounds like you were doing it beforehand, but it must be a nice, I mean, it must be a relief for everything to work out well, and then that be an extra option for doing another kind of experience for people, especially
Yeah.
if you, I'm imagining, if you have like a limited winter season, if there is the option of doing this other kind of experience, you've just extended your season a little bit by having some extra fun, dippy in and out canoe slash
Yeah.
sled experience.
Yeah.
I got a couple of questions. Like, how heavy is I'm guessing, did that affect your, wow, I'm not even finishing my question here. I'm imagining then, if you were thinking about how much gear you were going to have on this trip, if you're thinking about the fact that you have to like haul the canoe in and out of the water all the time, that could be quite tough, I'm imagining physically. Did you decide to try and get things a bit lighter weight or anything, or was that not a factor?
Not really. I mean, we did certainly change the way we packed from a winter trip. We had everything in waterproof
Yes.
bags.
Okay. Yeah.
Um, whereas the winter we don't. So we changed the way that we were packing things. We used canoe barrels. We basically packed as if it was a canoe trip. Um, but we still brought the wood stove and the canvas tent so that we could dry out our gear at the end of the day and cook over the wood stove. So we still treated it like it was winter time. We cut all our firewood, for the night each camp, and um, but when you're like hauling it up onto the ice, because there's such low friction, the weight actually doesn't. I mean, certainly a lighter canoe would slide easier,
Yeah.
but yeah, we didn't seem to have too tough of a time. Like basically, if the ice was too weak to hold the heavy canoe, it would just break until it was strong enough. And then once it was strong enough, you could really dig in we wore like stabilizers on our feet, so like spikes. So you
Okay.
could
Yeah.
dig your spikes in and then pull.
Oh,
Um,
okay. Okay,
yeah, and
that
then
didn't, my whole visual image completely changed. So I was thinking, how
yeah.
are you getting in and out of the ice? This is going to be a comedy scene.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, there were some comedy scenes for sure of people like having to having to get out of the canoe. We've got a rope to the canoe, and then people further up are pulling it, and then the people in the canoe have to get out on weak ice, so they're literally rolling towards the safer ice, like a rolling pin. And so yeah, there's definitely some creativity that had to happen. Um,
Nice.
but yeah, portaging was an interesting uh, feat because at first we thought, oh, well, we'll portage like a regular canoe trip where we'll carry everything. But like you mentioned, like there's a lot of heavy gear that we have to bring. So yeah, we've got wood stove and a big canvas tent that sleeps six. And um, so what we ended up doing was portaging some of the heavy stuff first, and then all six of us would drag the canoe on its skis over the portage. And then we'd all have like a hand on the canoe and the sled. And we found that that was actually faster than like unloading everything and portaging everything individually. So yeah, it was a
Okay.
bit of a hybrid portaging technique. So almost like we had toboggans. So
So I guess for people who don't canoe, at least in my context, I've only known the term portage from canoeing, but that you've probably made it pretty clear what it means already. But so to portage is like when there is no longer a waterway, Is that correct? It's no longer a waterway or an easy way to float through, so you have to actually pick the thing up and all your gear and kind of go by foot or hand, I guess
Yeah.
both, through the
Yes,
area, right?
between the connections from lake to lake usually, or like around a rapid or something like that. Yeah, exactly.
Yes, okay. It definitely had to portage a few rapids in my time, usually because I'm too scared.
Probably the smart move.
Definitely. We are, I mean, getting a little ahead of ourselves. I feel like you've done a pretty good job already of giving an indication of who you are and what you do, but I feel like it would be helpful for everyone listening to just give a quick little Kai in a nutshell, like intro as to who you are, what you're all about, and what you like to do, and the company that you own as well.
Yeah. So yeah, Dave and I, my husband, we live on a wilderness property just west of Sudbury, Ontario, Canada, which is about 6 hours north of Toronto for anyone who's familiar with the big city, um, along Lake Huron, which is one of the Great Lakes. And we guide snowshoe trips as a profession. We started the company in 2011 and or 10 rather, and have been, yeah, we guide people all over the world. They come and do 1 to 3 week trips with us, and most of them are travel based. So we'll move camp every day, but we do some more stationary, like base camp oriented programs now that we have a little bit more of a setup here at the pond, we call it. And yeah, we live completely off grid. Our nearest neighbor is 9 kilometers by rough ATV trail, or we can also access our property by boat, which is a 6 kilometer lake. And yeah, we've been here for 12 years now. And we built our own home. We lived in a tent for 3 years, like a prospector tent before we built our home. And now yeah, we've got solar, um, rainwater for our drinking water, and yeah, do a lot of foraging, wild edibles. I do a lot of fermenting and
And trapping too.
yeah. Yeah, and trapping. We are the licensed trapper for the surrounding Crown land. So we're surrounded by Crown land, which for those American listeners would be akin to like a state forest or a
Okay.
national forest, I should say. So it's basically public land, but no commercial developments, will be allowed. Or they do some like logging on Crown land, but yeah, there's no like settlements allowed, basically.
Isn't that land in some capacity like a mining spot as well? Like a, what's the term? There's like a, I mean, it's called Golden Pond where you are, right? And you named it that
Yes,
for a reason, that way for a reason.
yes. So our the way we got our lands, like it literally is surrounded by thousands and thousands of acres of crown land. So to have this tiny little square of private land is sort of bizarre. But the reason it is because it's a patent mining claim. So back
Ah,
in the 30s, the prospectors were allowed to, when they made a claim, um, put in a land claim as well. So the person who originally did the mining claim owned the land, and then that was being able to be sold as private land. So we have most people don't have the mineral rights to their land. So any miner could, if they discovered, a special mineral on your land, could then just start digging underneath it.
really?
Yeah. So we have the mineral rights as well. So and so that's why we call it Golden Pond, because it's the mineral potential is so high for gold on our land that we pay mineral tax.
Ah,
Um, we tried to say like, hey, we're never gonna mine here. Like, Can we not pay for it? They're like, no, the potential's too high.
So
Uh,
have you ever found any like gold at all? Have you ever like been tempted to do a bit of panning in the lake or in the pond?
no, no, because I don't know. I don't know if that would be a thing here. I mean, maybe it would be, but from my understanding, that it's like pretty deep down. In
Oh, okay.
we have like white quartz rock here, and I was told by a geologist that like when you look at the bare rock, when you see like a marbled line of quartz, like that's where you want to start digging, apparently. But yeah, no, I haven't done any mining. Although one time when we were building the foundation for this place, we had to drill into the bedrock, and this like gold dust came out, and we're like, oh my God. Um, so we sent it in to our geologist friend, and he's like, no, that's pyrite. So
Pyrites.
yeah.
Fool's
Ah,
gold. I think fool's gold is the class
mm,
the kind of known name, isn't it? I remember I was a bit of a this is something I've never told anyone on a public space, but I was a bit of a crystal nerd when I was a kid and
cool.
fool's gold. You say that, oh cool, not cool.
Yeah, it totally is. I love rocks.
But yeah, Pyrites or fool's gold was one of my favorites because you could always imagine
Yeah,
that it was real gold.
yeah. I have a couple pieces from around here, and yeah, I mean, just because it's not worth anything to like whatever special mineral people, it's still pretty and special to you.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It is. It's also often in quartz as well. I remember in back in the UK, definitely coveting pieces of quartz that are on a trail or something. They've got a little golden streak in them. It's always a very tempting thing. I remember my pockets being very heavy and trousers often falling down at the end of a hike with my parents when I was a kid.
Yeah,
But anyway,
yeah.
I
I've got a piece
digress.
up in my bedroom. Yeah. Who knew this was going to be a podcast about rocks?
You never know the rabbit hole that you might end up in. So, I mean, one thing, okay, there's two things. Many things in my mind, so many directions we could take. I'm very excited. So, I guess first of all, we should set up as well. The way in which you first arrived on my radar was quite a while ago, maybe 5-ish years ago from the TV show Alone. And it was season 7, which I think was a bit of a, for me, it was like a aha moment of just the whole idea of wilderness living and thriving in nature as a concept really hit home to me through that season. So
Mhm.
thank you for that.
I'm glad you've been a part of that.
So I would love to jump into that stuff a little bit deeper, maybe later on once we've talked a bit more. But we should probably, as part of your intro, set that up. I think you lasted a very long time, right? I think you came third in that season. Is that right? And you lasted how many days?
80 days. And
Okay,
yeah,
that's so impressive.
thank you. Yeah, it seems, yeah, I don't know. It like that season was a special season for sure. There was I don't know, there was something about the group. We all got along super, super well, and we've lost touch a little bit now, but you know, lives are busy.
Yeah.
But we do stay, you know, we get in contact every once in a while just to check in on each other, and yeah, it was a really special group for sure.
I mean, undoubtedly, so many good characters and just absolute monsters in terms of being able to. I mean, that sounds. I use that in a positive term, but like just being able to handle a bunch of hectic stuff going on. Yeah, I mean, so impressive. But the other thing I was going to say is I'd love to just go back a little bit as well and understand your kind of journey through your life, the experiences that you went through growing up, and just kind of piece together the puzzle pieces and figure out like what it is that influenced you to get to where you are now.
Yeah.
So I guess like where did you grow up in a wild place? Did you have lots of wild experiences when you were young, or was that something that came later?
Well, it's funny because it definitely was a part of my childhood, but my I didn't identify with it until later in life.
Okay.
Um, so for me, like when I look back at who I was as a child, I was an athlete. I was going to the Olympics. Like that was my MO. That was like what I lived for was one day I will be an Olympian, I will represent Canada, and you know, I didn't get as far as in my head winning a gold medal or anything, but I was like, I'm going to the Olympics. Um, and so from the age of 4, I was a gymnast.
Ah, okay.
And quite a competitive one. I was on the junior national team and um, I was training 35 hours a week. Um,
35.
yeah. And so it was like eat, go to school, go to gymnastics for 5 hours, and then eat, go to bed. Like there was, I, I, I didn't have much of a social life, besides the girls at the gym. And I loved it. Like I was just like, this is, what I want to do.
Mm.
Um, And then as you can imagine, gymnastics is a fairly dangerous sport and got a lot of injuries. And ultimately, what took me out was I had a pretty bad back injury. And, um, long story short, it took me out. I bruised several vertebrae. Thankfully, I didn't actually break anything.
What
But I
happened? If you don't mind saying.
No, no. I mean, it was right before a big competition, and I was just doing a bar routine, so the uneven bars, and I was sort of rushing, and I was doing like a pretty simple move where you jump from the low bar to the high bar, swing, and then let go and catch the low bar again
Yeah.
between your legs. And like I was like a sliver away. I went too far and missed the bar and then did a face plant and my legs came over top of my head and smashed down. So my butt hit my head. I like
Wow.
cobra. Um and at like a pretty high speed. And so it just took my breath away and yeah, couldn't move. And my coach was just like, get up, do it
Uh,
again. Like,
yeah.
um, not a whole lot of empathy for it. And I was like, I can't do it. And he's like, fine, move on to floor. So he sent me over to the floor to do a floor routine. And as soon as I started tumbling, I managed to get up, walk, start my routine. As soon as I started my first line of tumbling, like I just collapsed and that was it. Um, so yeah, at that point, I went to the hospital and, thankfully, yeah, no broken bones. But
Man.
that took me out, and I was like, well, I'm still going to the Olympics, so what can I do? Like, this is who I am, and so I was like, I've always loved swimming. Swimming's a safe sport, so I immediately, as soon as my back was starting to heal, and I mean, probably good for my back for therapy as well, swimming. So I started swimming again, just like dove right in, literally pun intended. Um, and started to excel with that. Same thing, got up to like the junior national level. But then like life started happening and I started getting random concussions from like car accident. A swing broke on me and I landed on my head. Handball in gym class. And once you have one concussion, it starts to become easier and easier to get more. And so I ended up accruing 9 concussions in a matter of I think 7 years.
Wow.
And it got to the point where when I was raised my heart rate in the water, I would get dizzy. And it got to the point where I could not sprint. Like I couldn't go. I felt so sick that I would, almost pass out in the water. So I'd be sitting on the side, watching my friends do these like puke-inducing training regimens. I would be jealous. I'd be watching them, being like, "Man, I wish I was you," and they would wish they were me because I got to, sit it out. And it just got to the point where I was like, I can't go as hard as I want to, and So that was it for swimming. I was like, but I'm still going to the Olympics. I got to. And then I was like, when I was a kid, I always looked up to Silken Laman, who was a Canadian rower. And I was like, man, she's a beast. Like, I would love to do that. But I'm not a big person, but I'm not a small person. I'm kind of in that middle category. And she was like a beast, like 6'2", you know.
Okay. How
Um,
tall are you?
I'm 5'6",
Okay.
and
Yeah,
so
that's
I'm like
pretty normal.
pretty average.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I at this point it's time to like go to school, go to university, and so I hunted down the Olympic coach who happened to be the varsity coach for a certain university. So I was like, I'm going there. He's going to be my coach, and I'm going to get on the team. And so one of the first things I did was have a meeting with him, and I was like, how do I do it? How do I become an Olympic rower? And he was like, you will never be an Olympic rower. And I was like, what? Like, what are you, why? And he's like, because you're a tweener. So I was like too small to be a heavyweight, but I was too big to be a lightweight, and there's no middle class. And I was like, well, I'll prove you wrong.
I'll show you.
So I trained and trained and trained and like broke a couple junior varsity records on the erg, and did really well at the junior varsity level because you have to start off junior. And like I tried to cut weight. So I think lightweight was like 135 you had to be, and my like baseline weight was 150, and um I'm a pretty dense person, and I
Me
couldn't do
too.
it. I couldn't cut. It was I enjoyed food and like having energy way too much. And I was just like, no, like and maybe I could have like, well, I can't say there was no way I would compete with the heavyweights, but like, I mean, they're like double your size, and
Hmm.
like, the reach of their arms, and it at that point I started to realize there was something wrong. And I was going to school for kinesiology, so I was going to be a sports therapist, physiotherapy, because I spent so much time with physio as a kid. And I just felt like I wanted to help athletes get through injuries so that, they could get back to the game, just like
Yes.
mine helped me. Um, and as I was going through school for that, something in me was changing, and I was like, I don't know about this. I started thinking about like, I don't want to be in an office for the rest of my life. Like my idea was that I would travel around with sports teams, and that would be awesome.
Yes.
Um, there was something going on. And I was like, there's something not quite right, and so I started brainstorming of all of the things that I wanted to do. And when I was 16, I was taken, my family went whitewater rafting on a world-class river in Ontario, the Ottawa River. And just as a fun weekend thing to do. And I fell in love with the guides. I was just like, I had a cute boy as my guide. But even just like looking at all the other rafts and the way that they were communicating with each other and how much fun they were having. And I was just like, I want to be you. And yeah, it really struck me just how much fun and adventure it was. And so the next summer I went to this cottage show, and I went to all of the rafting companies, and I asked them like, how do I become a guide? And one of the companies was like, well, we have this internship program where you come, you basically get paid nothing. But by the end of the summer, you'll be guiding your own raft. And I was like, yes. So when I was 17, I started whitewater rafting guiding, and within the first month, I was guiding my own raft. I was teaching whitewater kayaking, and like just really took to it. Um, and so when I was going to university for kinesiology, all I could think about was like, rafting and like all the other adventures that I could go on. And so I started, Google wasn't around, so I don't know what I was doing, browsing on, I don't know, I can't even remember, Yahoo maybe. Um, I was Yahooing schools and found this school in Northern Ontario um, where you could go to school for the outdoors and you get a 4-year Bachelor of Physical Education and you're specializing in outdoor adventure leadership. And so, yeah, it needed you had to do like an application portfolio. So you had to get like references and write an essay and like all this stuff. And the deadline was like February 15th. And it was like February 12th at that point. I was like, oh my God. Like, and I just sprung into action. I got my dad to drive me up to Sudbury to meet the program coordinator. And yeah, I didn't look back. I got in and changed schools and the rest was, the rest is history.
I
But
got
that is a long go on.
to no go. What are you going to say?
Well, I was just gonna say, like, that was a long answer to say that actually I started realizing that the outdoors and nature was actually a big part of my childhood, but it was being shadowed by my sports.
Yes.
Because my mom grew up in sort of cottage country lake in northern Ontario, and her parents built their own house on a lake. My grandfather was an accomplished carpenter, cabinet maker. He made all his own furniture, and I used to love going and watching him in the shop. And my grandmother had a huge garden, and she was a birder, and I would, go up and down her long, winding driveway picking berries on my own. I'm like 4 years old, picking berries for her to bake a pie, and like, um, my parents bought a property. There was nothing on it, just a trailer, and like same thing. I would just like wander around, popping touch me nots and like catching frogs and um, that's when I saw my first bear and like all of this was a part of me, but it didn't clue into me that that could be a lifestyle, that could
Yes.
be like that could be actually a way of life. Um, because I was so focused on the sporting aspect of my life. And
Yeah. So
so,
focused.
yeah, as I was in university, I was like, something's not right. And it was that call to be wild. And I realized like, oh, like I don't want to be in a box for the rest of my life. Like I want to be out and explore and experience the wild part of me. And that's where I was like, I'm on it. Let's go.
Yeah. It's funny. In a funny way, I went, I mean, not at all the same experience, but I definitely felt that same thing 5 or 6 years ago. Gradually, that realization of wild spaces. Again, I already spent a lot of time in wild places doing big adventurous type things with my family, very outdoorsy, lots of backpacking, hiking, multi-day backpack trips through like mountains in England and cycling in different countries, like the backpacking before it was really backpacking, not backpacking, sorry, bike packing. Um, so that was definitely a thing. It's interesting to have that kind of, I guess it's a cliche, but like that call to the wild, that
Mhm.
experience. But in a way, I do feel also, in a way, this might just be but I mean, I guess everyone listening to this is probably going to preaching to the converted, but I feel like that's where we're really supposed to be, right? We're not supposed to be in boxes. So there is like a feeling inside us after a while. I did the whole office experience for close to 10 years. And that was definitely a thing where it just isn't, at least for me, it wasn't comfortable. It's not a comfortable space to be in.
Oh yeah, 100%. And like it's a huge um what's the word? Like conflict because we're conditioned to be a certain way in a functioning society where you grow up, you go to school, you get married, you get a job, you have kids, wash, rinse, repeat.
It's so
And
true.
that's how a functioning society works. And so I want to be a contributing member to society. I don't want to just like run into the forest and never see a soul again, because we need that connection. We need that, you know, um, purpose, I guess, in some way. And a part of that is to serve others and be in a functioning society together. But there's not just one way of of that being functioning. And so I think I honestly, and maybe it's just because my echo chamber is growing bigger and bigger and bigger, but like it really feels like our generation is putting a little bit of a brake, like pumping the brakes a little bit on like the direction and the trajectory that we're going. We're starting to question a little
Yeah.
bit more of like, why do we need to have 40 hours of work every week? Why do
It's a
we?
big question.
Yeah. And I am I'm supportive of that question. It's like, why do I need to work for 5 days and then get 2 days to just catch up on all of my other life, chores, and then I maybe get an afternoon to do something that I like to do. Like, why can't that be actually reversed completely? And I mean, everybody has to make those decisions as to like how much money is enough, how much possessions is enough, how much, you know, like there's so many questions and decisions that you have to make in order to get there. But I'm I am definitely starting to trend towards I would like to work a lot less. I I I joke to people like my goal is to live like I'm semi-retired. Like I like working. I'm a workhorse. But it's like what am I working at
Yes.
is what, matters.
It's lovely to hear you say this because I totally relate to what you're saying. And I think there's always an element there's a little voice in my head saying, yeah, I mean, not everyone is in a position where you can not work all the time. And I think I'm like, personally, I'm very lucky having the opportunities I had to be able to work as a writer. And that definitely makes things a little easier in terms of having some flexibility in choosing to work as a freelancer and create a bit more space. But I do think that there's definitely a big step, at least there was for me, where you realize that you don't need that much stuff to be happy. There's only a few essential ingredients that you actually need. And I think nature is one of them. And I think well, maybe this is not true for everyone, but a good companion is another one. And once you have those things, along with like good experiences, having amazing experiences, then really you don't need the latest model of whatever car, house, appliance, phone, that like that treadmill that everyone gets on. I feel like I'm getting a bit preachy now, but it's definitely an experience that I think you have to go through, right? A realization.
Yeah,
I
for sure.
I have I've got a question for you. It sounds like from the story that you told me about all of your sports endeavors and your desire to get to the Olympics, which I can also relate to, by the way. I was obsessed, and I did also piggyback different sports with the goal of basically becoming an Olympian. I went through hockey and rugby, although rugby, I guess, isn't. Yeah, rugby's in the Olympics, isn't it? I'm not sure. I'm sure it must be. It's a massive sport. I forget now, but I went through that same process of obsessing, trying to get through the ranks, get higher and higher, get higher and higher, and yeah, there seems to be a fire in you that you are super driven to achieve. a high level in whatever you do. And I'm wondering, where do you think that came from? Was it from maybe the way you were brought up, or did it come from the gymnast, like the strong gymnast influence that you had from a very young age? What do you think?
Uh, Lots of things. Certainly through sport, you learn that determination, that grit, that tenacity. Um, but something that I learned about myself later, actually through Alone, um, is that my drive to please others is probably the one of the most defining characteristics of my childhood.
Ah,
And my dad also wanted to be an NHL hockey star. And he got high. He was in the OHL. And, from the story that I heard, like the drafting team was there looking at him, and he got Gordon Bombay slashed in the knee, and taken out.
oh no.
And he's got this giant scar on his knee. Um, and that was it. Like hockey over. And I think when he was raising his kids, my brother was a hockey athlete, and he was so hard on my brother, just like drilling him. Like we made an ice rink in the backyard, like just boom, 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 like just tough dad. Um, and he exhibited a lot of anger, rage, aggression, not physically, but emotionally. And I think that put this like fear in me of like, don't screw up. Don't don't do anything to ruffle feathers, and be a freaking good gymnast. And like, you know what I mean? Like it
Yeah.
was because that was how he showed love, was talking about visualization and being standing on the podium, and like those were the things that he valued. And so if I could be that person, then I would get that love. And he didn't express love um like I do. And um so my need to uh please, and I was the same with my teachers, my coaches. It was like, behave, be proper, and you will have that positive reinforcement. And like that was like a huge driving force for me. It was like, and it got to the point in my like post alone sort of therapy that I was like, did I even want to go to the Olympics? Did I even like gymnastics? Did I even want, you know what I mean? Like it was like,
Yeah.
or was I chasing that positive reinforcement from the people who wanted me to go, or who, and and that's probably like a closed loop system where like they think I like gymnastics, so they're encouraging me, and I think, you know what I mean? Like um, the
Yeah.
therapy behind that is probably, more money than I can afford. But that I think drove me to be better. Because I was chasing that love, that positive reinforcement. And so I'm grateful for that, because I am a determined person. I am a go-getter, and I don't think we would be living in a house we built, um, and everything that we've accomplished if it wasn't for that.
Yes. It's definitely a
Mhm.
useful asset to have. Being able to get up and actually make shit happen.
But now I'm at this point now in my life where I'm like, whoa, like I'm trying to like slow the pony down, to be like, okay, like let's take a minute and reassess. And You don't have to always be go, 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 go. We feel settled. Like our house is not finished. You can see behind me, we don't have siding on the house, but we've got running water, we've got a sauna, we've got a wood-fired hot tub now. We have a three-bay garage that we built with heated floors and a moon board installed, which is like a climbing wall. So we're feeling like pretty set up here.
Yes.
And it's time for me to just like take a minute and that is a little bit of a scary feeling for me, slowing down,
Yeah. Yeah.
because if I'm not doing all of this, well, who am I then?
It's time to think as well.
Hmm. Hmm.
Time to think a bit more deeply about things, I guess. Because when you're non-stop, it's easy to just be focusing on the next task. And this is
Yeah,
from my personal experience.
yeah.
But I'm curious then, you said that these big questions, which sound quite like the floor is getting taken out from underneath you. Did you actually want to be a gymnast? Did you even want to go to the Olympics? Maybe you can tell a little bit about the story of how you got into Alone. Did you ask yourself the question, did I even want to go to Alone? Was that even, or was that just for approval of others?
For sure. Yeah. Hmm. But yeah, I can answer that question about, did I even want to go on alone? Because yeah, it's a question like yeah, I don't know what happened. Like, um, originally it was Dave that was wanting to go. He was the one that he applied after season 4. Our friends, Jim and Ted Baird won. And
Legends.
yeah, and we were watching them. And as soon as we found out that they were on the show, I was just like, well, they're gonna win for sure. And for not knowing any of the other participants either, they had a similar background to us with like expeditions. And I feel like when you do an expedition in the wilderness, there's this tenacity, adaptability, ingenuity, and mindset that you just have to accomplish your goal, out there. And um, so, anyways, we watched them, and after that, I was not like, I would love to do that. Because we were living in a tent at that time. Like we were already doing it. We were like living it, but with, comfort in that we could go to the grocery store when we needed to. Um,
Okay.
But we're like still we gotta cut all our own wood. We're dealing with frozen, dish sinks and mice and like we're in the elements. We're already doing it. So at that point I was just like, oh, okay, sweet. Like, yeah, I'm not gonna apply. But I didn't know this, but Dave applied for season 5, but season 5 was a what do you
The
call it?
comeback.
Redemption season.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that was off. And then he didn't get a call for season 6. But then for season 7, they called him and they wanted him to send in a video and apply. And then through their research of him, discovered that I was also into the outdoors and we lived off grid and that sort of thing. And so they had asked me if I would apply. And I was like, oh, I don't know, like, not really my thing. But
How did that make Dave feel?
well, at first he was just like, yeah, apply if you want to. And then I realized that if you get into the top 20, you get flown to New York for a week, and all expenses paid. I was like, well, we could use a vacation. This would be great. Uh, it's like we had already been like just working like dogs. At
For,
this point, we had built our house.
wow, for how
But it
many
was
years were you like working? So this is when you're at Golden Pond. How many years had you been like head down, homesteading hard, trying to get things set up? But
7 years. Like we,
7 years.
yeah, and like, and like, and we had, our business was 9 years old at that point. So like we, and we started with nothing, like nothing. And the property didn't have a single trail on it. So like we were like, we had $3,000 to start our dream. And we didn't have a boat. We didn't have a tent. We didn't have tools. We didn't have a chainsaw. We didn't have a battery operated drill. We didn't have nothing. I think we had a shovel and a hammer and like, a couple tarps. Like, and so every dollar that we earned went into the property and the business. So not only were we building an infant business, we were building an infant homestead. And so like it was really touch and go for a while, racking up the bad debt, like credit card debt, and like, not knowing how we were going to make payments, and while still trying to keep growing the business and trying to continue making our lives comfortable. Um, we so and we were seeing the light. Like it was starting to, bank account was starting to go into the positive, and like, but I was exhausted. Like I didn't realize how tired I was until we got to New York and the executive producers asked me why I wanted to do it. And I just burst into tears and I just said, I'm tired. I need a break. And they laughed, like just like you did, because it's like, I'm pretty sure you're in the wrong place for a break. But for me, it was just like, I just need to be away from the business, away from the homestead, the list, the to-do list. I just needed to change. And, that seemed like a good idea to like try and challenge myself. I love a good challenge. Um, something to focus on that wasn't the business, but that had potential for huge life gains as far as finances go, that will just finally allow us to have that little bit of, a lot of it, of breathing room, so that we could start reclaiming our time a little bit. And that was what was really important to me, was like, if I'm going to do this, I am going to do my damnedest to like finish the job, get to 100 days, and, make it worth our time. Because for me, what I saw it as a job.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. And so like the big kicker for me was that Dave actually wanted to do this. And like the producers weren't going to choose both of us
Mm.
because we were a couple. That would be weird. But also, it's just the two of us running the business. We can't both leave. Um, so it was in my head and his head and probably the producer's head, it was an either or none. And so by me getting chosen, I felt like I took his spot. He had to stay home, run the business, uh, and like that was not great. Like that was not a he was tired too. He
Yes.
wanted a break too. And so for me to go off and have this incredible adventure while he is stuck back in the, you know, ever
Yeah.
changing but mundane like job where we had to work day in and day out, was a
So I
challenge.
guess his workload has increased as well. Like his work's kind of gone up a huge
A
amount.
100%. And so that was like a huge motivating factor for me of like, don't screw this up. Like you're there to do a job and to represent both myself, Dave, the company, and you're not leaving because you want to. And that's why um, I didn't leave until I was physically in danger. Um, yeah.
It's such a complex a situation emotionally as well, I'm guessing, because you must have felt, I'm guessing there must have been some guilt involved in some capacity. I mean, I'm not putting feelings in for you. You can speak for yourself, but it's got to be a complex thing. And also on Dave's side, it's his dream, but also being excited for you and knowing that you are such a powerhouse in this area. So it's yeah, how was that time beforehand? Was there like tension between you, or was it okay?
Um, well, yeah. So when we got the call, uh, that it would be me and not Dave, like that was so awkward because it was like I'm supposed to be celebrating, but we're also mourning,
Yeah,
Dave's rejection. And yeah, he just was honest with me. He's like, congratulations, I'm gonna need a couple of days.
yeah,
And yeah, so like for 2.5 days, like we just gave each other space. Um, and that was tough because it was like, I don't know, like I need you to help me get ready for this, but also I know that this sucks for you.
yeah,
Um, and so what ended up happening was quite amazing for him. Um, because then like 2 days after that, he got a call from a company that specializes in high Arctic adventures, and they had a last minute position opening, and they wanted him to take it. And it was a 6-week contract north of Baffin Island, and it started like in in a week or something. And so he left. He went to the art. I said, "Yes, you're going. Like,
yeah,
don't even question it. This is your consolation prize."
yeah. It's perfect timing.
And yeah, it was a good distraction. Like he was able to do something he's always wanted to do. He's seeing polar bears and all kinds of different whales. And but for me, I was like, you know what? It's probably best because it would have been too hard for him to like see me getting all my gear ready. And um like I made almost all of my clothing, and at the same time I'm trying to put on weight. And I remember, so he got back from the Arctic a week before I was leaving.
Wow.
uh, so my alone, and that's the longest we had ever been apart, that Arctic contract. So like before that, we were, you know, business partners, lovers, partners, best friends. Like we did everything together. And then he takes off for 6 weeks while then I'm trying to like get ready for this um, adventure. Then a week we had, uh, and then said goodbye for, up to Christmas time. So yeah, it was intense build up for sure. But yes, there was a lot of guilt um, throughout the whole experience, which you don't get to see on camera, which is like when I'm crying on national television, it's like it's complicated. Like it's not just because I missed that moose, it's because I missed that moose and now I'm failing because maybe Dave would have gotten that moose, or maybe like I'm failing and I'm not going to make it to 100 days and I've wasted the opportunity because Dave could have been out here. And so there was all this guilt playing up and self-inflicted, of course, but also,
Hmm.
it was a true disappointment for him. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's also, I mean, as you explained before, it's a product of your own psychology as well, right? You are wired to please others, and if yeah, that's I can imagine why that would be so fueled, emotion like so emotionally charged. Definitely. Yeah, wow, that must have been intense. So I guess I'd love to talk a little bit about your prep that you did. I mean, I didn't realize that you were doing that like most of your prep on your own, which in a funny way, I guess is quite good emotional prep beforehand because, you're getting a practice run at this solo existence.
Yeah.
You said you made your own clothing and some equipment and things. Do you mind sharing some of that stuff? And did you find it like worked really well in the environment?
For sure. Yeah, I was well, my the biggest thing that I made that was imperative was my moccasins for the cold weather. I knew it was going to be a cold, dry environment, and so we use moccasins, which are just, leather boots basically, but they're designed to stay breathable, and
Ah,
you can make them as wide as you need to pack as much insulation as you can in them. So, as you're walking throughout the day, your feet is generating moisture, and that moisture can breathe through all of your layers except for that outer layer. It's going to stop and then freeze. And then you're going to have a layer of ice surrounding your feet for the rest of the day. And so you're literally walking around with ice blocks on your feet. Whereas with the moccasins, all of the layers are breathable, so that moisture comes through the hide and then gets wicked away by the cold snow. So your feet stay warm, comfortable, and dry all day.
interesting.
Um, and so that's what we use on our winter expeditions. But I also knew I knew I was going to be limited on calories, and calories equals warmth. So I needed to try to overcompensate for that. And so I made them like super, super thick, and like they were almost as wide as they were long. Um, and I like double stitched every pucker and like made sure that, they were bomb proof, and made my boot liners with felted wool, and my mittens were extra thick, and my hat had fur sewn into it, and then I made a fur hat as well for sleeping, with like a flap that came down to keep my nose warm at night, and like these big ear flaps that I could tie around my head as like a scarf. And um make the classic stuff like an arm guard for the archery, and you're modifying your gear as much as you can so that you're anticipating your needs. And that was a huge part of what I believed to be my advantage in this climate, was that like I have, hundreds and hundreds of days in this environment in the cold. So I knew the different clothing uh, challenges that you could encounter and how to overcome those. And so that was a big part of my mm, home field advantage, even though it was in a totally different territory. The climate and the environment, the flora and the fauna were all plants and environments that I was comfortable in. And
Mm.
so, yeah, that's was a big part of sort of that strategy.
I can imagine that's also going to be an amazing psychological benefit because if you've literally handpicked, gone through every single, like almost every item of clothing, every stitch, you know is going to hold up, like because you've put the work in yourself. That's got to give you like an underlying sense of confidence in your gear, which more so than I guess anyone who would normally just be buying stuff. You don't know for sure if something's going to withhold the challenges.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it made me feel really, really confident. And when it started to get cold, and I was looking like, we have a week with the other participants before we got inserted into the field. And I was looking at some of their clothing, and I was like, oh man, like that's not gonna cut it.
Oh man.
Yeah. And so like we spent a couple days in Yellowknife before we went into the field. And I was like trying to coach people, and like we were going to the outdoor store that they had there, and I was trying to like pick out things that would be more useful for some people. Um, and trying to give people strategies. Like, for me, like all summer I was um shooting my bow with my insulated gloves on, because I
Yes.
was like, you're not gonna be able to just walk around with bare hands.
Yeah.
Um, and so when we had the 10 days of orientation, I told everyone, put your gloves on, like start shooting with your gloves on. And, they were thankful for that. And yeah, it was a lot of my prep was philosophy, actually. Like I read a lot of philosophy and books about um, stoicism and overcoming obstacles, and a lot of like positive self affirmations, and that became really helpful for me in the field.
That's so interesting. I mean, it's so aware as well, because I do think, from a personal point of view, I'm usually quite good at learning skills, and it's an ongoing mission. I never claim to be able to do what you do as well as you do it. But I do think psychologically that's a big thing, right? Like if your brain isn't in gear and you're not able to handle the emotions that you're feeling, then that's going to be a big issue, because whatever's going on, your perspective can have a huge effect on whether something is good or bad even.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a very smart move doing that. There's a couple of things that like I would love to ask specifics about Alone, your experience. I mean, like the fishing, I think is a big was like speaking of ups and downs, I think was a big thing for you in that season.
Definitely. Yeah.
How did you find it? I mean, like I know that it was tricky for you at the beginning in terms of gill
Yeah.
net.
So, yeah. Day one, that was the first thing. That was my first number one strategy, was get that gill net in the water.
Hmm.
So m moment one was walk your shoreline and find a spot for your gill net. And, our spots are, I don't know how big, but uh, probably about 5 square kilometers. And I walked my whole shoreline, and it was all shallow and super bouldery. Um, like you have to go, at least 100 feet before you can get deep enough um, to do anything, and really bouldery. So I I went all the way to the end, and I finally came across this like end of a peninsula, and then there was this like bay with an island and this deep channel, and the water just like dropped off, and I was like, this would be perfect because the fish would come in into this nice sheltered spot. And as I'm like getting excited about it, my inReach or whatever you call it, yellow brick, was beeped and said, "You're beyond your boundary. Please turn around." And I was like, "Can I put my gill net here?" They said, "No.
Oh no.
Please turn around." And then like 50 meters beyond that peninsula, I was like on back on my land. I was like, why wouldn't they just end the spot at a natural end where this like piece of land juts out? Like I was so upset. But it was like, okay, well, that's the game I'm playing. Like that, you know, that's what I signed up for. In a real life situation, that would have been like I would have set up camp there, and that would be my new home.
Yeah, it's sorted.
And it did not happen that way. I saw two huge otters, river otters there though. I've never seen such big otters. It was so cool because I scared them. They were just sort of on the rock, and they like made this really big grunting sound. But they look like sea lions, like they were massive. Um,
Well fed.
yeah. But anyways, so then I tried hand lining. I did find a spot where I was like, okay, well, this is as good as it's gonna get. So I did put my gill net in, but the waves just would thrash it on the shoreline, and it would just get whipped and tangled. It was just draping on the you know lake floor. So it was just not happening. It was more. trouble than it was worth at that
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
Trying to keep it from getting thrashed out, trying to get it deeper. So eventually I just gave up on the gill net until the ice came in. And then same thing with the hand lining, like I tried to leave trot lines in the water, wasn't getting anything. And just, would try and try and try. But then I was like, you know what? What's not working is fishing, but what is working is snaring. And so I, threw a lot of attention at my trap line and ended up having 270 snares out on the line and, caught over 40 rabbits and um,
Wow.
was eating every day. So I ate half a rabbit every day along with mushrooms and berries and lichen and so I never went a day without eating and feeling full and
Interesting.
uh, and that was amazing. So I was really grateful for that. But of course, the dialogue in your head is rabbit starvation. There's not enough fat on the rabbits, and there truly wasn't. There's a little bit of kidney fat and a little bit of shoulder fat, but other than that, it was like you're toast. So yes, I was eating every day. Yes, I was feeling full every day, but uh, I wasn't stopping the weight loss. It was just a slow, but consistent starvation.
Did you find that that created any mental things in your head if you're worrying about that? I mean, I know in my mind I'd be like rabbit starvation, rabbit starvation. Do you know, like it's easy if when you're on your own, I can imagine for a long period of time to just get stuck in certain thought processes.
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
totally. Yeah, you're like, I mean, you're pinching your fat on your body, right? Just being like, okay, like that's getting low. Um, and at some point, I never felt uh, too low in energy that I couldn't do anything. So I was always feeling like actually fairly competent and energized.
Amazing.
But that's because I had the fat on my body to compensate. Um, and I listened to my body. So you can get protein poisoning by eating too much protein. And I think that's what was happening to Joe on my season because he also killed it with the rabbits. And he said like he was eating as much as he could. Like sometimes I think he said he ate like two full rabbits in a day, but then he would feel super lethargic and like his legs were so heavy he couldn't move. Um, and I think that's what was happening to him. Is
That's
that
so interesting.
he thought he was doing a good thing by eating, eating, eating as much as you can, but your body can only process about 1,000 calories a day of protein.
Oh,
And so beyond that, you're just like putting stress on your liver and your kidneys to try and filter out what they can, and then the rest is just going through and not being able to be stored. So you're just actually using more energy to try and process all of this food that your body can't use. So I really tried to pay attention to what I was putting in and what was coming out. And I was finding that like even if I wanted to eat more snowshoe hare, I wasn't able to actually poop it out.
oh,
Um,
interesting.
so it was like um, a constant battle for me with pooping. It was like something that was like on my mind constantly. It
Yeah,
was insane. Like you don't, everyday life, like a lot of people have GI issues and like pooping is a big part of their conversation in their head about like how much and how little and that kind of thing. But like
yeah.
it, as far as survival goes, like it's a huge part of it that people don't. It's not like a hot topic that you love to talk about, but it is like it was my obsession. It was like, if I'm going to eat today, make sure I get something out.
Yes.
And like, when you're eating a regular diet, whatever your waste, whatever you produce is usually proportionate to what you've put in. And so that's kind of what I was going through in my head. It was like, okay, I ate this much, and then my body's going to use as much as it can, and then it's going to
Yeah.
have some waste. And so it became a huge part of my daily routine.
Did you, I mean, I'm guessing it's also tricky, like hydration and all that kind of thing plays a big part in making sure everything is flowing smoothly, shall we say. So I'm guessing that that was a big motivation then, just making sure that you're drinking plenty and trying to keep things flowing. Because I guess for people who don't know, if you don't get your system going and you actually kind of like shut down and you can't poop for like a longer period of time, you can poison yourself, right? And I think some people even have been pulled out of the show alone because they couldn't poop for like 10 days or more. Is that right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So actually, I have Michelle from season 6 to thank for bringing that to like major forefront of like ways that you could get extracted from the field. And yeah, she had compacted lower intestine and had to be evacuated because she was getting poisoned from the inside. Um, and yeah, that was a huge part of like I was like, I am not getting evacuated because I can't poop. Like, no shame in for Michelle. It's a real thing, but it was like, okay, like I need to take extra measures to make sure that this doesn't happen.
Yeah, it's the danger is real.
Yeah.
So, one other thing you said about mushrooms, and I remember listening to another interview that you did. I'm curious, what mushrooms were they that you were finding? Was it a variety, or was it like boletes, or what was it that you were finding out there?
There was a lot of elites, but there was also a lot of like Rosellas.
Yeah, okay.
And they're not the tastiest mushroom, but
They have
you know,
calories.
they have calories. Yeah. And a couple times I found a beautiful, beautiful hedgehog,
Oh,
hawkeye mushroom.
amazing.
And I I found one in a tree because squirrels will collect mushrooms and then they dehydrate them before storing them so they don't go moldy. It's brilliant.
Yeah.
Um, and so I saw this massive mushroom hanging in this tree. I was like, thank you. And then right where I found it, I looked down and there was a fresh one. And it was like, it was just as big. And so I sliced that up and fried it up and like, oh my
It
God,
tastes
like
so
it's
good.
the best mushroom in the world. Yeah. So yeah, a lot. And to be honest, like I know a lot about mushrooms. I definitely know a lot of the mushrooms to avoid and what they look like, what their, characteristics are. And so there were some mushrooms that I didn't know if they were edible. And I was like, but they don't have the signs or characteristics of the poisonous ones that I know. I'm gonna try it.
Oh,
And
okay.
so there were a number of mushrooms where I was like, it looks like it's in the Rosella family, doesn't give me any red flags. You know, touch it to your tongue, no real foul taste.
Hmm.
Let's throw it in and see what happens. And there, that could be a bad mistake, and I don't recommend that to anybody like on an everyday, type of journey. But I know enough about mushrooms to definitely know the big red flag ones. Um, and I had this mentality where it was like sometimes you got to risk it for the biscuit, and
Yeah.
I did the same for my drinking water. Right off the hop, I was like, this is the fifth largest freshwater lake in the world. It's deep, it's cold. Bacteria can't live in really cold water, so I'm going to risk it and just drink straight out of the lake. And if I get sick, I'm going to get sick within 3 days, and that will be the end, and that will be the mistake that I made. But if I don't get sick, I'm going to save a ton of time boiling water and like I can stay way more hydrated
Yeah.
and um so I just said risk it for the biscuit. Here we go. Let's try this and it paid off. I didn't get sick. So
Sometimes I feel like, at least for myself, like mentally, if you eat something and you're like, oh, I'm on the borderline of whether this is okay or not, you can do things in your own mind where you're suddenly hyper aware of your own stomach. And I'm sure what would be normal sensations, you're suddenly like, oh, what was that? Am I going down a slippery slope right now? I don't, did you find
yep.
any of that at all?
Well, I did that just this weekend actually. I was like, oh look, an edible plant. It was a trout lily. And so I like threw it in my mouth and I was like, oh, this is really tasty. And then I found another one. I was like, here, parents, try this. And I gave them each one. I ate it. And then we were walking down the trail, my tongue was like kind of burning a little bit. And I was like, does anybody else have a really bitter taste in their mouth? And they're like, yeah. I start spitting and it's like yellow. It was like a yellow flower. So I was like, okay. And now I'm like spitting a little bit more because I was like, I hope that was the trout lily. And I'm like spitting and I was like, okay, as I'm walking, I'm trying to like figure out like, is it harder to swallow right now or am I just making that up?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it didn't happen to me on Alone, but yeah, just this weekend it happened.
You're getting into panic stations. Okay,
Yeah.
so I've
And I was like, how are you guys doing? Are you doing okay?
everyone's trying to keep it together for the other person or the other people. I love it. Thanks for sharing a bunch of stuff about Alone. I got like a couple of small more questions about it, but then I'd love to talk a little bit more if we have time about Lure of the North and the whole experiences and everything that you provide as well. But I guess Alone wise, two questions. The first one is, did you come back from the show with like a change in focus in any capacity, or had like that experience adjusted your priorities in any way, and what were they?
Um, Short term, it was like overwhelmingly clear how much distractions that there are in a modern life. Um, when I got back, like we're a winter-based business, and I got back December 18th. So like I had 2 weeks before our first trip started, and then that was it, like 3 months of madness, like day to day, every day is from 5 a.m. to 10 p.m. Um, and I found it really difficult to multitask.
Interesting.
So when you're in the wild, your focus is so honed on food, water, shelter, you know, um, very, it's not simple, but it's, um, focused. Like it's very, like, I'm getting firewood now, I am getting water now. I am walking my trap line now. And, um, your senses are so open to everything. So like you're walking your trap line and you hear a twig snap, and you look, and there's something there, and um, you're just like everything is so wide open. The aperture is just like huge. And so when you come back and your senses are still wide open, all of a sudden it's like ping, 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 ping. There's like emails to answer, phone calls to answer. Your staff is asking you questions. Your dog wants out. Your dog is hungry. You're like, there's just so much going on. I sometimes had to just like stop and like go upstairs, shut the door, and just like take a minute because it wasn't just like my emotions were overwhelmed, but it was my whole body was overwhelmed. And so it took a bit to recalibrate to that because I even though I came back into the wilderness because we live off grid, so it's not like I had flashing lights everywhere. I was still in nature, but like I was also in the hub of a buzzing business at that point.
Yeah.
Um, and so short term, that was really difficult for me. And then now it's been 4.5 years, and the things that I'm always drawn back to is taking that time to to open your senses, because we live in a world where there's so many distractions constantly, and that means that our body has to protect ourselves and close off those senses, because otherwise it would be too much. And so for me, like if I'm doing stuff on the computer, working on the website or whatever, like I'm like half an hour max before I have to like I can't look at the screen anymore. I need to uh, dial back my sort of focus and then like go outside and let my sensory um, uh, senses open back up
Mm.
and like feel and take it all in. I'm really lucky that I literally can just walk out my front door and have that happen. But I really am always trying to encourage people to take that time during their workday to go for a walk. Every city, every town has green space that you can find, you know, most places anyways. And I think it's really important for people to be able to take that break because productivity levels go up as well. And so for me with like big changes, I'm just like I can't do that to myself to say like, oh yeah, today is a computer day and you're gonna work all day on the computer.
Yeah.
It's just not gonna happen.
It's such a good choice to make. I mean, I'm pretty busy at the moment, juggling this thing that I'm really excited about, doing a podcast and learning so much from so many amazing people. And then also juggling other jobs as well, all that kind of stuff. But it does result sometimes in some question marks in my head where, like, I got into this thing to be celebrating wild spaces, so I should be going outside. So it's definitely that balance, right? And I think an awareness and a quick reset every now and then definitely helps. And I'm also pretty lucky here. We have a little 3 acre spot here where amongst the redwood trees, it's very, I mean,
Right.
I often just go and sit outside as well, even if I'm on my computer. So
Yeah,
I'm just out there around the birds and then
exactly.
things happen that pull you out anyway. Yesterday, or maybe it was the day before, a bird just came and landed on my chest just
Ah,
as I was actually researching this podcast. Just
ah,
came and
wow.
it sat there for
That's
five
amazing.
five minutes. I couldn't believe it.
Oh,
I didn't understand why or what was happening. But
ah, that's
it
amazing.
just sat there and it was only a small little Tweety bird. I should probably be able to tell you what it was, but yeah, and so I think when you're out in that environment a little bit, things happen that make you just have to reconnect. But it's great. It's great advice. So I've got
Yeah.
one more question about alone, if that's
Mhm.
okay. And we don't have to talk a lot about this necessarily if you don't want to, but there's something which I wasn't really hugely aware of is the whole refeeding kind of process, the refeeding program, I guess it is, within the show. I guess
Mhm.
most people, once they watch the show, it's amazing, highs and lows. And then it's like leaves people like viewers' minds. It's like over, wait till the next one. But the experience of the show doesn't stop when the show stops, right? Like it's an ongoing process to recover afterwards.
Yeah.
How was your experience with that recovery, and what actually happens with the refeeding now?
Yeah. So thankfully, I was season 7. So they had 7 seasons to learn from their mistakes. And there were many made. I won't go into those, but um, for our season, we had a medic that was on site with us every day, and they were being advised by a physician who was in town, and a dietitian who was on call as well. Um, and basically, they are instructed to start by replacing electrolytes in your body, um, and feeding very simple, digestible foods. So I actually went back in my feeding. Like I was eating more out in the field than initially I was in the refeeding, because they were like, okay, we gotta, they just assumed that I was eating nothing. So then they were like, okay, we're gonna start you off with liquid broth. And I was like, okay, but I just ate fish head soup like yesterday, and I had mushrooms and lichen and berries. Like, give me some stew. I want some stew. But no.
That must have been
So,
annoying.
well, they adjusted for me. So I was like, okay, like, yeah. The biggest thing that they wanted to see was just like what I was, focused on out there, was like, when you eat, are you going to poop? And um, so they actually gave us like senna leaves, which is like a natural stool softener. And yeah, they're just basically pumping you with the fluids, like the electrolytes, the bone broth, the just to try and get things woken up. And then they started feeding like saltine crackers with a little bit of butter. And then they would give you a blended soup. And then they would give you a chunky soup. And then, so like they work you up by until the end, you're, steak and potatoes again, kind of thing. Um, and then the interesting part of it was the psychology behind it. So at first, they would give you the 3 meals a day, but then they would give you 3 snacks a day. So it would, you would wake up, you would have your breakfast, and then like an hour or two later, they'd bring you a snack. Then an hour or two later, you get your lunch, and then they would bring you these like portions. Um, and then throughout the week, they started saying, okay, here are all of your snacks for the day. You get to decide when you're going to eat them. And remember that if you ever want more, all you have to do is ask. And so it was this like psychology game of like um, giving the participant the power of
Yes.
choice, and because some people, like, usually two things will happen if it's not if it goes wrong. One, they'll hoard the food, and two, they'll binge the food. So either you'll be like, oh my God, look at all this food, I need to preserve it and not eat it.
Yes.
Or, oh my God, there's food, I need to eat it because someone might steal it, kind of thing. So it was that sort of recoaching that I was like, okay, welcome back to the real world where food is unlimited. And so it was that psychology of it all. And my refeeding went really, really well, because I ate every single day. Um, I didn't, like, some people regain like 15 pounds like immediately because most of it's water weight.
Ah,
Um, so they're just rehydrating and bringing their bodies up to proper hydration levels. And so that was I didn't have that. And for me, my first like real poop was like such a huge celebration. I was like, oh my God, like this is it feels so good to be so natural. And like um that was a celebration for me. And then a lot of other people have a lot of trouble sleeping.
hmm.
So they would give us melatonin to help, and like sleepy time tea and stuff like that. It was like sleeping, hydrating, and pooping was like the top three priorities of sort of the recovery. And
I'm guessing the main points of conversation with Dave, if you call him.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I pooped today. Uh, So yeah, we had a lot of conversations about that.
How long did this refeeding process go on for? Like the how long did they keep you out for? Or was it did it vary for different people?
It varied for each person, but I was there for 10 days.
Okay. Okay.
And then for me, like back home, I found it really difficult to sleep for the first year. So I was like on melatonin for a year and I just like I could not go to sleep unless I had it. And then it got to the point where I was like, okay, I'm pretty sure I'm addicted to melatonin. And and not physically because you produce melatonin naturally in your body,
Yeah.
but mentally, I was like, cannot sleep unless I pop this pill. So I had like a bottle with like four left, and I was like, that's it. I'm done. I'm not taking it. You're going to bed and you're gonna sleep. And I kind of I was like, okay, just chamomile tea. And then that worked, and yeah, so I slowly got off it and could sleep again. But yeah, that was like a source of stress for me for a while,
I
just like
bet.
not being able to go to sleep without having that sort of like nightly melatonin.
Yeah. And also sleep is such like it's the medicine. It's like the original medicine, isn't it? So if you, especially if you're doing like a physical job and you're doing it like working hard, your body even more so needs to recover, right? So if you then suddenly staring at the ceiling at 2 a.m. in the morning, that's definitely not a nice mental loop to get into, I can imagine.
Yeah, exactly.
So how was, I'm curious, like I mean, Lure of the North, you had that running for quite a few years before Alone happened. Did you notice a change in pace or anything? Did going on the show bring like awareness of your experiences that you offer more into the mainstream? Did you suddenly find there are a lot more people interested, or was it kind of a slower burn?
Um, so we also had a retail arm of our business where we would sell like DIY kits for the moccasins and the snowshoe weaving and that sort of thing. And that married really well with our business because we make a lot of our own gear for the expeditions and people make their own gear for coming on trips. And so we noticed a real uptick in the retail part of our sales. And then the other cool thing that I noticed was that a lot more women were coming on our trips. And often they would mention it was because they saw Alone. So our ratios of men to women have really increased. And so it's almost 50-50 now, which is amazing.
Yeah, that's got
Mhm.
to be a great feeling.
It is, yeah. And so many people reached out to me and like thanked me for being open and vulnerable, and sharing sort of the highs and the lows on the show because I think um, yeah, it's relatable. It's not like I was just this superwoman who was indestructible and like was like born to do this and could just muscle through anything. Um, but by showing that sort of those internal struggles and working through them and not giving up, because of them was something that I think resonated with a lot of people.
You said that in terms of your business, you said you previously had a business or part like the retail side of things where the products. I remember, I mean, I looked it up myself watching your show, like the headband that you were wearing. I guess it's like a buff style
Yeah.
thing that you were wearing. And that, I mean, I'm sure thousands and thousands of, if not millions of people must have looked that up. I don't know the numbers of the viewership, but it must have worked. Yeah, definitely. So, but the thing is, I noticed from a previous conversation that you had in an interview that you, at some point, you decided to make a step because of the success that happened with that retail. It was pulling you away from some of the other things that you wanted to be doing, like providing the amazing expeditions and experiences for people.
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah, so we,
Okay,
oh,
go.
go ahead.
Well, no, I mean we can go into that. Go ahead.
Well, no, I was just going to say that it was one of those decisions where we decided to walk away from that because it was taking us away from being in nature and pursuing, the wild spaces, and it it was successful in that it was helping the bank account, which was definitely um, a welcomed break. Because we again started from nothing, so it allowed us to build our house and make improvements to our lives, so I'm grateful for that. But it was also like it was like working a retail job. Like it was you're inside, printing shipping labels, packing orders, and
Yes.
it was too much.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh, I don't have any time now to do the things that I love, and I'm staring out at this beautiful wilderness that I can't be a part of. So that was a big big decision for us to like be struggling financially for so long, then to finally have some sort of financial security, and then to be like, actually, you know what? I'm good. Like I'd rather be, living a little bit leaner but meaner.
Definitely. And I think that's a realization, right? That like we talked about earlier on, I think you can go through that process where you realize what's important in life and what you really need. And so it's a bold choice to make that change. It must have been scary to be like, okay, I'm like cutting off the hand that feeds me, um,
Yeah,
in some ways.
literally. Yeah, no,
I
literally.
mean, it's a bold move, so congrats for that. I guess what I want to ask now is, what is it that you love to do now? Like what are your favorite kind of experiences, or maybe give an overview of the kind of things that you offer, but also then what are the things that you really just love to do? Because you gave up that side of packing boxes for sales. What is it that you gave that up for?
Yeah, I mean, I have only like just started to really take advantage of that time because we have been still sort of we've been ramping down, and now I'm starting to like breathe. There's some breathing room. So one of the passions that Dave and I had before we moved out here was rock climbing. And we lived on Vancouver Island in BC for a few years and really loved the mountains and the climbing. And so we look back on those times just super fondly, and we were like going to Red Rocks. So we've spent quite a number of days in Red Rocks, Nevada, just outside of Las Vegas, climbing the sandstone there. And so that was one of the first things we did was go back there last fall for 2 weeks, and then we went to Kentucky just a couple weeks ago for some rock climbing there.
Sweet.
And then there's just a lot of local cliffs in Ontario that are, jutting out of beautiful lakes. So it's like a destination weekend for us. So climbing is definitely a huge passion of ours, and that we aren't turning into a business. We actually did. We had a company called Rock On, because Ontario's abbreviation is ON,
Ah,
for a little bit, and we were like, no, we're not turning this into a business. Um, so that's just our own personal passion. And then other things like pottery. I've just like always known that I would love potting, and we have so like we're on a clay field here, so harvesting my own clay and turning it
oh, amazing.
into functional items. I've just been turning my kitchen into hand creations. All our bowls and mugs and plates and cutlery holders and stuff like that is all just like from my own hands. And it's with right now that's commercial clay because I don't have a kiln yet. And the pottery studio in town won't fire my own
Ah,
clay.
okay.
They're worried about it blowing up. It's understandable. So But this summer I'm hoping to build my own kiln. Yeah, so I can fire my own, and so that's something I've always known that I would love, but never had the chance to dive into it. So I've definitely been going head first right into that hobby. And then same with like the homesteading stuff. Lots of fermenting going on. I keep bees, so making salves with the wax and mead, and um, foraging for mushrooms and other wild edibles, and that's part of the courses that we offer in the summertime too, and would like to offer more of. But then yeah, we like rent. We've got a couple guest tents and small cabin on our property that we rent out on Airbnb, and that's been something that's been sort of like a fun little supplemental hobby as well, and keeps a little bit of money trickling in the summertime. So yeah, I mean, it's Dave and I play a lot of board games. Um, We've got a whole wall of board games, and I have so many books to read. Like I mean, it's just the tip of the iceberg at this point with, and I think the biggest thing is like allowing yourself the time to be like, what do I want to pursue?
Yes.
Um, and rather than substituting that for just screen time, like actually taking the time to develop those new hobbies, um, and see what you like. And so for me, like that's the time that I'm giving myself now. Like, yeah, I'm making sourdough and all those COVID things that people took up. I'm like getting into it now.
The COVID hobbies is,
Yeah,
I think hunting was maybe one of mine some time
yeah,
ago.
nice. Yeah,
So I feel like I, I mean, in terms of time, we probably should start rounding things up. But I do have so many other questions, and if you'd be open to it, I'd love to get you back on at some point in the future and really get into more of the specifics about like polar style. I don't know if this is the correct term. Forgive me if it's wrong, but polar style expeditions, um, some of the bit more technical things as well. I think that's so super interesting, and just for me personally as well, I find that really interesting. So I'd love to get you on and ask you some more info about that whole thing, how that works, and stories about your experiences traveling over ice for long periods of time. And I know you did a trek once, which was over 70 days, I believe, at some point, talking about your
yep,
experiences with that. So if that sounds okay to you, I'd love to talk to you about that in the future.
yeah, I would love that. Yeah,
Okay, perfect. I guess one question I have is, well, there's two. Okay, two. I can't resist. One hobby that sprung my mind is, like, popped into my mind when I was looking through your Instagram is polar dipping. I mean, that
Mm.
looks like savagery, but also fun. Do you do that often, or is that like a once a year thing? Like what?
Uh, so we usually do it on our courses that are base camp oriented.
Okay.
So anytime we do like a skills course, we'll yeah head out on the lake and cut a hole, and then we'll have like a big open fire like right on the lake, and then people jump in and stay in, try and control their breathing, experience it, and then get out, and then you're warming by the open fire. Someone's got a towel there ready for you. And we do that just to shed light on the fact of like, oh, it's not so bad. Like, oh, like you can handle it. You can, especially if you're wearing all of your clothing, it takes time for the water to saturate through your layers, and like how quick you can actually get out of the water and what happens after you get out of the water. And it's just a confidence boost for people to actually then be like, okay, yeah, like I'm gonna walk on this ice because
Yes.
I've experienced it now, what it feels like to go through. And oh yeah, I'm surrounded by a team of people that's going to help me, and got all these resources to warm me back up. And so it's a really good exercise in sort of that comfort gaining. And then we do it more often now because we have a sauna. So we'll like
Ah.
we'll have a hot sauna session and then go jump in the water and then come back to the sauna and jump in and out.
Oh,
So
amazing.
that becomes like a bit of a routine for us. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, so I got the last question I had in my mind, which is probably more appropriate for the next episode we record if we manage to find the time in the future. But one of the things you mentioned in another interview, and this is kind of tied up in that as well, is about risk aversion or like understanding risks and assessing them, or risk assessment, maybe that was the right term. But I guess my question is, like a word of advice that may be helpful to someone in the future is like, is there a frame of mind or a way of thinking that helps keep you alive when you're out in such extreme conditions? Like, is there like just a mental attitude or something specific or a general thing, whatever pops into your mind, is that could be useful to people if they're getting out there and things kind of turn south?
For winter specific or just wilderness?
Whatever you like. Winter's good. If I think it's more specific to you.
Um, I mean, you're just constantly counting lemons, right? Like you're like, okay, like this is less than ideal here, but we have all of these other ducks in a row. But the more lemons that you're, accumulating, then all this, you can only juggle so many balls in the air before one drops. And so it's just trying to really nip those lemons in the butt. It's all about minimizing the risk. And of course, you're taking risk, but sometimes you do have to make those calculated risks because it's going to get you to a safer place. Or like sometimes you like, okay, people are getting low in energy, and let's have a quick snack so that we can push to get to this nicer campsite. It's gonna be more sheltered from the wind or the rain or the snow, better resources. And you're just constantly checking in on those lemons to be like, how many are adding up? Can I take one away? Can I take another one away by doing this? And so even though you're like out having a good time, you're always on. You're always that like self-aware, group aware, and you're just always constantly doing those checks.
It sounds daunting, but also amazing. Like, I guess you just have to have that. It's even the term, labeling them as lemons is kind of playful, which puts like a bit of a positive slant, which is obvious. You have this positive slant on everything that you kind of have endured. So
Yeah.
yeah, thanks for the advice and amazing. Thank you, Kai, for the amazing conversation and all of the stories and being so open with all of your answers today.
I appreciate. Yeah, I always love chatting face to face, even though it's, long ways away. It's nice
Yeah,
to connect with people, and yeah, yeah. Thanks for having me. I'd love to come back.
well, amazing. So, is there anywhere that people can find you? Where do you want to send people if they want to follow you or check out your website or book a future adventure?
Yeah, so we are lureofthenorth.com. That's our website. And then we're at Lure of the North on Instagram and Facebook. And yeah, that's where you will find us. Or
Perfect.
on Golden Pond.
Perfect. I mean, it would be a dream. One day I'd love to come up and see Golden Pond. I mean, it sounds amazing from everything I've seen before and heard in this chat today.
Our
Well,
door is always open, literally.
well, thank you again. And yeah, let's catch up soon.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Right, folks, that's another episode done and dusted. I want to say a big thank you again to Kai for sharing her time and stories. I'm excited to say, I kind of put her on the spot earlier, but another session is in the calendar. We are going to chat more about a bunch of stuff, predominantly around the amazing snowy expeditions and all the wild stuff that her and her husband Dave do with Lure of the North, way out in the boonies in Canada. So I'm very excited for that. That will be here in a few weeks, I would imagine. Also, be sure to check out Lure of the North on their website and also their social. I think it's Instagram and Facebook, they said. I'll put links down in the show notes. Thanks again to everyone for listening to the show. If you have any thoughts or feelings or feedback, then by all means, send them my way. I would love to learn how to grow this podcast, how to improve. I'm always open to hearing suggestions. So definitely reach out if you have an idea of a person or a subject matter that you'd love me to cover. It would also be very helpful to just take a moment to tap the subscribe or follow button, however you like to listen to your podcasts. It might be different wordage. Ooh, wordage. Is that a word? Anyway, if you could just subscribe and follow, then it'll be a big help. Again, I also just want to try and tap into the community knowledge. If you happen to know anyone who would be a great guest on this podcast, then sling me a message on Instagram or email me at thewilddispatch@gmail.com. Okay, that's enough blathering from me. Thank you for listening, everyone. And I'll just finish by saying, if it feels wild, then get out and get after it. I think that has a ring to it still. I'm going to stick with it for a while. If you like that ending, let me know. If you hate it, also let me know.